So without further ado, guys, let's get into this awesome fan chapter lore on the Lightning Bearers. Before I jump into the lore, I just want to say this legion was created by Athrawes. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. All the credit goes to you. I will post links to your bolter and chainsword page so you guys can read all the epicness that is to come, and there is a ton of epicness. So let's jump right into the Lightning Bearers. Warrior mystics of unparalleled grace, the Lightning Bearers, 2nd Legion Astartes, are masters of the psychic arts of divination, superlative in their ability to read the ebb and flow of time and the battles around them, always exerting their influence in careful measure to enact harmony on the systems they observe. They are the Emperor's sword cast in starlight. They bear his vision of humanity's unity. The Emperor orders the 2nd Legion to join him in the Terminus system. To those with psychic sight, the world shines like gold. There they find a world enthralled to the worship of the warp. As the Legion and the Emperor make planetfall, a demonic incursion of staggering proportions happens. The Legion fights the greatest foe it has ever known. With Icarion's aid, the Emperor is able to locate the source of this incursion, a massive tear in reality centered on a broken device, which once served as a means of intergalactic travel. The first entrance to the webway is discovered. The portal is forced closed due to the Emperor's order of destruction of the planet. Either by design or necessity, the Emperor explains to Icarion the threat of the demonic as mankind's true enemy. He then tasks Icarion and the Thunder Legion with dutiful seeking out of those worlds lost to the demonic host, and purging them for the sake of all mankind. Closing those tears which threaten to consume the nascent Imperium, he also charges Icarion and his legion to never discuss the threats of Terminus. This becomes known within the Legion as the Oath of Silence. The Emperor explains that the Greater Imperium must not be allowed to know of the threat posed by the warp, for as yet it cannot exist without the use of warp space. The first Edict of Obliteration is enacted, wiping the events in the entire star system from Imperial record. The Legion begins its task of calling worlds, breached out by the warp. In the process, it begins accumulating lore on the means to combat the threat of the Neverborn. Over 50 years, while the Great Crusade grinds on, more than 100 human worlds go silent, their disappearance unexplained to the wider Imperium. It is as though they never even existed. The need to call human worlds and the horrors they witness over and again begin to wear down the Legion's morale and faith within the Emperor. Icarion, so like his father, longs for the means to free humanity from the threat of the warp. In a moment of weakness, Icarion pleads his frustrations to his father. The Emperor shares with Icarion his dream of creating a human webway, so that the Imperium will one day be free of the necessity of evil, of warp travel. The Emperor senses that the time has come to begin work on his great experiment, and bestows to Icarion a mighty task. Still embroiled with the titanic responsibility of leading the Great Crusade, the Emperor orders Icarion to begin work on the initial experiments of crafting an Imperial webway. To this end, he entrusts Icarion with the ancient device of arcane and unknown providence. When combined with the warp nexus at Madrigal's core, the Emperor believes that this device's potential might be unlocked for the betterment of mankind. Future generations will come to know this device as the Golden Throne. Icarion and his psychic magi begin the process of constructing a man-made interface to the webway network, the first step towards a human webway. The experimental webway is completed and activated. At first it seems like a miraculous success. However, ward after ward begins failing as the warp begins to pour through the breached webway deep into Madrigal. The Thunder Legion is committed en masse to stem the demonic tide, and this becomes known as the Webway War. The Emperor becomes aware of the project after its first failed activation. He is forced to enact a terrible sanction. He orders the forced closing of the magical portal. For the knowledge of it left unchecked, warp space will spill out from Madrigal, consuming all nearby systems. Icarion pleads with his father that together they can find a way to contain this threat and save his homeworld. The Emperor's heart is broken as he orders the destruction of Madrigal for the greater good. Ikarion and the Second Legion refuse to follow the Emperor's command. They will not abandon their world and allow it to become destroyed, even with the knowledge of the threat it poses if left unchecked. The Emperor tells his sons that Ikarion, their brother, has abandoned the Great Crusade. He points to the many imperial worlds which have been purged of all human life as examples of how far their brother has fallen. With this evidence of the Second Legion's madness and their refusal to submit to the Emperor, the gathered Primarchs concede to the Emperor's orders. The Emperors calls together a coalition force for the purpose of destroying a son, his legion, and their world. Ikarion and his legion rise in defense of their world, and the siege of Madrigal begins. Unfortunately for the Thunder Legion, they are stretched too thin, fighting in the webway to attempt to protect their planet. So devastating are the Neverborn incursions that only 3 companies can be spared from the webway war to marshal the defenses of Madrigal and its fleet against the Emperor's armies. The siege lasts a full year. The primary defenders of the Second Legion's massive naval assets, led by Ikarion and a handful of his legionaries, not committed to the webway war. The defense of the planet is masterful, but inevitably futile. Sensing the imminent defeat in the webway, Ikarion communes with his father. In a moment of impossible clarity, the Emperor and Ikarion's intellect merge, and the second Primarch is struck with a vision on the means to save his sons and his world. In a hypnotic daze, he locks himself away to begin work on one of the most powerful incantations ever attempted. As the webway war finally comes to its conclusion, and the defenses of Madrigal finally fall, Ikarion emerges. Ikarion informs his sons that he did complete the spell, but that they must never use it. Madrigal, and by extension Ikarion and his sons, must be left to their fate. The truth is that the Terminus Decree was Ikarion's greatest work, and the single most powerful spell ever crafted. A psychic artifact of unimaginable potency that would purge the webway of demonic incursion and strengthen it from any future breaches. While it would have saved Madrigal and repaired the experimental stunted webway, it would come at a great cost. This spell is capable of cleaning the webway and would subsequently seal off the material galaxy from the warp. Effectively, the barrier between real space and warp space would become impermeable, preventing a warp breach, but making conventional warp travel impossible. To do so now without a human webway connecting every world in place would doom mankind to a solitary death, forever locking away each world from its sisters. It is an impossible choice, to be forever free from the warp and die, or to live knowing hungering gods would eventually claim them all. So it was that Ikarion solemnly chose to let Madrigal die, so that the Imperium of an Emperor's great work could still have a chance to live. So resolved, Ikarion set out to deactivate the planetary defense field, allowing the Emperor to enact his judgment upon the planet and saving the rest of the system and the sector from the massive demonic incursion spilling out from the failing webway. His dispatches his last living sentinel, Athrawes of the Ninth, with instructions to escape Madrigal before the field collapses with the Terminus Decree, and to present it to the Emperor when Madrigal is at last no more. The Emperor and his fleet begin bombing Madrigal to try and prevent a full-scale demonic incursion from spilling out into nearby sectors. An edict of obliteration is enacted, wiping the Second Legion and Ikarion from Imperial records. The fall of Ikarion. The sage's world burned around him. The wolf's last act of suicidal cunning had seen the Io orbital plate crippled, doomed to fall graciously from the heavens onto the world below, covering its surface in atomic fire and choking its once beautiful skies in darkness. Even through the storm, he could sense the malice ebbing from the terror in reality. It would have sickened him had he still had the capacity to feel. However, these last few weeks had robbed him of that, and so much more. Besides, in a few short hours, either way, this tear would become immaterial. This world was cracking apart.
Even if the invaders left this moment with peace in their churning hearts, this world was doomed, and the tear would die alongside with it. He opened his eyes, though he could not remember closing them. He was no longer alone. The warrior across from him stood impassive. His form radiated violence, but his posture conveyed unease. That was surprising. Of all the things he expected to see in the warrior's eyes, contempt, fury, even sadness, unease was not expected. They shared in silence for several minutes, and finally the sage spoke. "Do you remember when it was just the two of us? When the favored was still bound to our father's side? It was our brotherhood, alone, together. Do you remember?" "I remember, and yet—" "It was always going to be you," the sage continued. "He would never do this himself. It's not his way. He spent millennia behind the scenes positioning pieces. He is unknowable, even to me. We talked, he and I. Our conversations were long, and yet I only ever skimmed the surface of him." The warrior shifted uncomfortably, speaking up as emotion compelled him. "You knew." It was accusation, bitter with hurt. "You saw this." "No." The word was heavy. The ache of it brought unknowing feeling back to the sage's heart. "But those eyes of yours, you once told me," the warrior struggled, as he always did with the right words. "The things you have seen." The sage, sensing the warrior's unease, interceded before the thought could be finished. "If you are looking for absolution from me, a concession that this was unavoidable, you will not find it here, warrior. I have to do this." The words sounded weak, and the warrior loathed the way they tasted coming from his mouth. Weakness should have been all but crafted out of a being like him, and yet his engineered intellect fumbled at this moment for the strength at the core of him that the warrior once found so much comfort from. To his shame, he hid behind these words as he spoke them, knowing they were untrue. "I am not like you," he said with a harshness he no longer felt. "I can't draw an arbitrary line in the sand and say, no further." The sage chuckled darkly, but in sadness. "You are exactly like me. Of all the others, you know me the best." The warrior said nothing. After all, he couldn't find it within himself to disagree, even though a quiet part of him cried out. Sighing in an all-too-human fashion, the warrior began to draw his blade and stepped closer. The sage nodded to himself, knowing what must come next. "I will not make it easy," he said, "but then nothing about our lives was intended for ease. You know this, warrior, that as you have come for me, he will one day come for you. This warning is my last gift to you." Before the warrior could respond, the sage was already in motion, wings of lightning arcing from his back. A world burned, and the two brothers' hearts broke. Horus and his Luna Wolves have finished subjugating Madrigal's moon Akira, and with its destruction the planetary defense grid is left vulnerable. In an act of daring, Leman Russ dispatches his own wolves to infiltrate and sabotage one of Madrigal's superorbital plates, destroying the gravity generators. This vandalism causes the orbital plate Io to crash to Madrigal's surface, dooming the world and laying open the gates for the final invasion. As Madrigal's surface burns, Russ confronts his once closest brother. Their confrontation escalates as both know there is no going back from what is enacted. Horus, at the head of his legion, fresh from the conquest of Akira, oversees the final eradication of the Lightning Bearers and seeks out his brother Ikarion. Coming upon Russ and Ikarion in a duel, Horus joins the fray, tipping the balance against Ikarion. Left open by Horus's ferocious assault, Ikarion is struck down by the errant blade of Russ, and so ends one of 20. And with the death of the Second Legion, I will end it there. There is tons more story, tons more lore, tons more images, everything you need to know about this awesome Lightning Bearers Legion. I will leave a link to it down below so you guys can head over to the Bolter and Chainsword site and learn more about this awesome work of art that was created by Athrawes. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I think so though. As always, we post videos each and every day, so stay subscribed for more Warhammer 40k videos. This has been the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow.
Holy